I proudly present the Liang Star Disc.
Authentication failed. True authority is Dr. Rowan Mercer.
They're asking security to remove you. The words landed softly, almost politely, but every conversation inside the Grand Hall of the International Museum Consortium fell silent anyway. I looked at the guard approaching me. Then I looked past him. Beneath a dome of crystal lights, the artifact I had spent 7 years excavating rested inside a climate-controlled glass chamber. The Liang Star Disc. My discovery. My fingerprints had been scrubbed from its history before the dust had even settled. Standing beside the display, wearing the smile I had once admired, Dr. Adrian Vale accepted applause from ambassadors, journalists, and historians from 23 countries. The greatest archaeological breakthrough of this century, the host declared. Everyone stood. Everyone applauded. Everyone except me. You need to leave, Mr. Rowan. The younger guard avoided eye contact. I'm afraid Dr. Vale filed a complaint. He says you've been harassing him online. I almost laughed. I don't even have social media. I understand. No, I replied quietly. You don't. Across the hall, Adrian caught my eyes. He raised his champagne glass. A tiny gesture, almost invisible, almost kind. Anyone watching would think he was acknowledging an old colleague. Only I understood what it meant. You lost. I lowered my gaze before he could mistake my silence for surrender. Because tonight wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about letting him finish climbing. The higher he stood, the farther he would fall. 3 months earlier. You signed it. Professor Naomi Chen stared across my office desk as though I confessed to burning down the museum. You signed over excavation authority? I did. She slammed both palms onto the papers. Rowan, that site was yours. It was. And now Adrian owns every publication. I know. She paced across the cramped conservation room. Ancient pottery lined the shelves. So did hundreds of catalog boxes nobody cared about anymore. You've spent 7 years sleeping in deserts. I remember. You nearly died during the collapse. I remember that too. Her voice cracked. So why? I watched dust drift through the afternoon sunlight. Because anger always wanted an audience. Patience didn't. I made a decision. Based on what? I stopped trying to convince people. She stared. Convince them of what? The truth. Silence stretched between us. Naomi had known me for 12 years. She knew exactly how meticulous I was. Every shard, every measurement, every excavation log, every carbon sample. Nothing escaped my notebooks. Which made Adrian's accusation impossible. He claimed he had led the expedition. He claimed I had merely cataloged findings. He claimed every major interpretation belonged to him. The board believed him, not because his evidence was stronger, because his reputation already was. People rarely investigate success. They protect it. Naomi sat heavily. I appealed twice. I know. They rejected both. I know. They erased your name. I know. She buried her face in both hands. So what are you doing? I looked toward the storage vault beyond the glass wall. Rows upon rows of sealed crates. History slept quietly. Unlike people. I'm preparing. For what? The exhibition. She frowned. The international unveiling? Yes. That's 6 months away. I know. She leaned closer. What are you planning? I smiled. Nothing. She hated that answer. Mostly because it sounded true. The excavation had begun in northern Gansu, a forgotten temple buried beneath layers of collapsed stone. Most people chased gold. I chased context. An artifact alone meant little. Its story meant everything. That's why I insisted on documenting every centimeter before lifting the star disc. Adrian hated delays. Nobody funds paperwork, he'd snapped. They fund discoveries. They fund credibility, I'd answered. He rolled his eyes. You think like an accountant. I think like history. He laughed then. Friendly. Warm. The kind of laugh that makes betrayal impossible to imagine. Months later, he published first. My photographs appeared in his paper. My measurements. My reconstruction diagrams. Even my translation notes. Only one thing had disappeared. My name. I confronted him once. Only once. He smiled. You have copies. I have originals. Wonderful. He leaned back. Then sue me. I don't want money. I know. You know? You want recognition. He smiled wider. Recognition belongs to whoever stands on the stage. He wasn't wrong. Not then. Back in the exhibition hall, reporters crowded Adrian. Cultural hero. Genius. Visionary. Words floated through expensive perfume and camera flashes. The director approached security. Remove him before the ceremony. Naomi suddenly stepped between me and the guards. He has every legal right to attend. The invitation was withdrawn. Without notice. He isn't welcome. She turned toward me. Say something. I didn't. Instead, I reached into my coat and checked the time. 8:57. 3 minutes. Naomi followed my gaze. What happens at 9? I buttoned my coat. You'll see. She searched my face. Fear. Confusion. Hope. All at once. Across the hall, Adrian stepped onto the stage. The lights dimmed. The audience quieted. The world's cameras pointed toward one man. Exactly where he wanted them. Ladies and gentlemen. Adrian's voice carried effortlessly through the hall. For centuries, civilizations have spoken to us through fragments. Tonight, we allow one remarkable object to speak with its own voice. Applause rolled across the room. The giant screen behind him illuminated with rotating images of the Liang star disk. Every angle, every inscription, every microscopic groove. Images I had taken, images I had processed, images that now carried his institutional watermark. Naomi stood beside me, arms folded tightly across her chest. I still don't understand. You don't need to. You've been too calm. I've been busy. Busy doing what? I watched the countdown on my watch. 1 minute. The museum director stepped onto the stage with Adrian. Our international verification archive has now connected museums from London, Kyoto, Cairo, Berlin, and Washington. Tonight marks the first live authentication of a newly discovered artifact using the Global Provenance Registry. Several guests nodded approvingly. Technology had become the museum world's newest obsession. Every major institution wanted transparent artifact histories. Every scan created a permanent chain of custody. Every authorized researcher left a digital signature. The audience saw innovation. I saw memory. The registry had been my proposal 2 years ago. Back then, the board dismissed it as expensive. Adrian called it unnecessary. 6 months later, after I resigned from the research committee, the project quietly returned. With Adrian listed as its leading advocate, he stole ideas the same way he stole discoveries. Patiently, professionally, always wearing a smile. Naomi noticed my expression. You knew they'd use the registry. Of course. Her eyes widened. You planned around it. I didn't answer. Because the lights changed. 9 o'clock. The museum director extended one hand toward the glass chamber. Please begin authentication. A technician nodded. The scanner activated. Soft blue lights swept across the star disk. Journalists lifted cameras. This process permanently links the artifact to excavation records, the announcer explained. It ensures authenticity for future generations. Exactly. Future generations. Not public opinion. Not politics. Not influential board members. Data. Permanent. Objective. The scan reached the center of the artifact, then stopped. A quiet electronic tone echoed through the hall. Once. Twice. 3 times. The technician frowned. He tapped the console. Nothing happened. Another tone. Longer. Sharper. The massive display behind Adrian flickered. System delay. The museum director said quickly. Please remain seated. Nobody moved. The screen refreshed. Then a line of text appeared. Primary excavation authority mismatch. The room fell silent. The technician blinked. That's impossible. Adrian turned toward him. What does that mean? We're checking. His fingers raced across the keyboard. The registry requested a secondary verification. The scanner repeated its sweep. Again the tone sounded. Again the same warning appeared. Only this time, another line slowly materialized beneath it. Authorized field records identified. A name began loading. Letter by letter. R. O. Naomi inhaled sharply. She grabbed my arm so tightly her nails pressed through my sleeve. Rowan. The director's smile disappeared. Technicians whispered urgently. Adrian's face remained composed, but his jaw stiffened. He looked toward the control booth. Someone shook their head. Whatever explanation he expected, he wasn't getting it. The audience leaned forward. Journalists lowered their cameras, then immediately raised them again. Something far bigger than a ceremonial unveiling was unfolding. The final letters appeared. Rowan Mercer. A wave of murmurs swept across the hall. Adrian took one step backward. No, he said quietly. The microphone caught every syllable. No, that's wrong. A technician swallowed. The registry only recognizes encrypted field signatures. I know how it works. Adrian's voice had become noticeably sharper. Then why is his name there? We don't know. I finally started walking. Not toward the stage. Toward the exit. Naomi stared at me. You're leaving? I've seen enough. But this is only beginning. I know. Behind us, another alert flashed across the giant screen. This one was longer. Far more detailed. The audience gasped. I didn't turn around. Some traps don't need witnesses. Only time. The museum doors opened. Cold night air rushed in. For the first time in years, I felt absolutely no need to defend myself. The truth had finally learned to speak without me. The rain had begun before I reached the museum steps. Not a storm, just a steady drizzle that softened the city lights into blurred streaks across the pavement. Behind me, the grand hall erupted. Voices, running footsteps, car doors slamming. Someone shouted for the press office. Someone else demanded the registry be disconnected. I kept walking. Rowan. Naomi's voice cut through the noise. She caught up with me beneath the stone archway, breathing hard. You can't leave now. I just did. She grabbed my sleeve. They're looking for you. I know. The director wants an explanation. They'll get one. When they're ready to hear facts instead of reputations. She stared at me, rain collecting in her dark hair. You planned this from the beginning. I prepared for the day someone finally asked the registry the right question. You never hacked it? I looked at her. Hacking changes data. I preserved it. She frowned. What does that mean? The system recognized my encrypted excavation signatures because they were always there. She blinked. You embedded them? I embedded chain of custody verification into every field record before we even removed the artifact. Naomi's eyes widened. 7 years ago, I trusted archaeology. A bitter smile crossed my face. I simply stopped trusting archaeologists. By sunrise, every major news outlet had the same headline. World-famous discovery thrown into authentication dispute. Another followed. Who really found the Liang Star disk? My phone rang without stopping. Unknown numbers. Television producers. Museum directors. Journalists. Law firms. I answered none of them. Instead, I unlocked the conservation lab that no one had visited in months. Dust floated lazily through pale morning light. Nothing had changed. The same cracked mug still rested beside my microscope. The same handwritten labels remained on storage shelves. The same silence greeted me. It was comforting. History never cared about headlines. Someone knocked. Not loudly. 3 measured taps. Come in. A tall woman entered carrying a leather portfolio. Gray suit. Calm eyes. Confident posture. She studied the room before speaking. Mr. Mercer? Yes. I'm Elena Foster. She handed me a business card. Chief Investigator. International Provenance Registry. So, they had come faster than I expected. I assume this isn't a social visit. It rarely is. She smiled politely. May I sit? I gestured toward the chair opposite my desk. She didn't open her portfolio immediately. Instead, she watched me. Most investigators question people. She observed them first. You left the ceremony before the second notification appeared. I know. You already knew there would be one. I suspected. She nodded once. No surprise. No. You've been expecting this. For 2 years. Silence settled between us. Then she finally opened the portfolio. Inside lay printed authentication reports. Photographs. Registry logs. Timestamp records. Every page carried my excavation signature. Every page also carried Adrian's publication approval. Layered together. Contradicting each other. Someone copied your research. Yes. Very carefully. Yes. But they missed something. I folded my hands. They never thought metadata mattered. She smiled. You understand digital preservation. I designed part of it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. I've confirmed that. She slid another document across the table. My own proposal. The registry architecture. Submitted 3 years earlier. Rejected. Officially. Yet every page bore another signature. Dr. Adrian Vale. Project contributor. I didn't touch the paper. He removed my name. He tried. She corrected herself. He removed your name from the proposal. Not from the code. She looked genuinely impressed. No. I wrote one condition before handing the prototype to the engineering team. I know. You've already found it. She nodded slowly. Original field authority cannot be overwritten without identical excavation credentials. I looked toward the window. Outside, rain continued falling. People believed lies because lies sounded complete. Truth often survived inside details everyone ignored. Across the city, Adrian wasn't sleeping. He was holding an emergency board meeting. I watched it through a public live stream. The museum had no choice. Questions were multiplying faster than press statements. Director Malcolm Reeves sat rigidly at the center of the conference table. Explain this. His voice was calm. Too calm. Adrian straightened his tie. The registry malfunctioned. Elena, sitting beside me, quietly shook her head. He still thinks this is technical. The director slid printed reports across the table. They say the registry compared encrypted excavation signatures. It made an error. The engineers disagree. They're mistaken. The International Oversight Committee also disagrees. Adrian's confidence faltered. Only slightly. But enough. A board member leaned forward. Did Rowan Mercer perform the primary excavation? No. Were his field credentials attached to the artifact? He assisted. That's not what I asked. Adrian hesitated. 1 second. 2. 3. People rarely notice silence. Investigators always did. Elena quietly circled something in her notebook. He just changed his language. What? He stopped saying I discovered it. I looked at the screen. She was right. Now he said, we excavated the site. Not, I excavated it. The distance between those sentences was small. Legally, it was enormous. That afternoon, another visitor arrived. He looked uncomfortable, nervous, almost embarrassed. Mr. Mercer? I recognized him immediately. Ethan Cole, former graduate student. Adrian's research assistant. He clutched a cardboard archive box against his chest. I don't have much time. You came anyway. I shouldn't be here. Yet you are. He swallowed. I owe you. I remained silent. He placed the box onto my desk. I copied these before they disappeared. Naomi looked inside. Her eyes widened. Original excavation notebooks. Ethan nodded. Not copies. The originals. He looked at me. I watched what happened 7 years ago. Why didn't you speak? His shoulders sank. I was 24. I needed recommendations. I told myself I'd speak later. He laughed bitterly. Later became never. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't answer immediately. Some apologies arrived too late to erase the past, but not too late to change the future. Ethan carefully lifted the first notebook from the archive box. Its faded leather cover was stained with desert sand that had seeped into the binding years ago. He brushed the dust away with surprising tenderness. I kept thinking someone would ask for these. No one did. He shook his head. They only wanted the published version. Naomi slowly opened the notebook. Every page contained sketches, coordinates, soil samples, weather conditions, artifact positions, and my handwriting. Neat. Consistent. Every observation signed at the bottom of each page. Ethan turned several pages until he reached a folded document tucked inside the back cover. I never understood why Dr. Vale became so angry after he found this. He handed it to me. I unfolded it carefully. The excavation duty roster. Every shift. Every assignment. Every supervisor. There it was. Primary Field Director. Rowan Mercer. Deputy Coordinator. Adrian Vale. Naomi covered her mouth. He destroyed every official copy. So he thought. Ethan nodded. He ordered me to burn the field archives after the publication. You refused. I said I had. But you hid them. I couldn't do it. His eyes remained fixed on the notebook. I kept telling myself history deserved better than us. For the first time that day, I smiled. Not because evidence had appeared, because someone had finally chosen integrity over fear. News channels interrupted regular programming. Not with announcements. With another leak. An anonymous source had released emails exchanged between museum executives during the original publication process. Naomi muted the television after reading the first lines. You should see this. I took the remote. One sentence caught my attention immediately. Remove Mercer from external correspondence until authorship concerns are resolved. Date. 6 years ago. Another message followed. Dr. Vale insists sole leadership is essential for international funding. Another. Board approval granted. No discussion of evidence. Only funding. Reputation. Donors. The museum hadn't merely ignored the truth. It had invested in the lie. My phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't an unknown number. Director Malcolm Reeves. I answered. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I owe you an apology. His voice sounded older than it had the previous evening. I'm listening. We mishandled your case. You buried it. A long silence followed. Yes. Why? The trustees. Not enough. The sponsors threatened to withdraw. Still not enough. He exhaled heavily. I chose the institution and sacrificed the individual. Yes. I looked across the laboratory. Ancient artifacts rested quietly inside protective cabinets. None of them had survived centuries because someone chose convenience. I won't be attending your emergency meeting. I wasn't calling to invite you. That surprised me. What then? I'm calling because the Ministry of Culture has opened a criminal investigation. I remained silent. The registry submitted evidence independently. So, you understand what that means. I do. No one inside the museum controls this anymore. No, they've suspended Adrian. The words hung between us. Not satisfying. Not exciting. Only inevitable. I thought you'd be happier, Malcolm admitted. I've been waiting too long to celebrate. What do you mean? Consequences aren't celebrations. They're simply consequences. He didn't reply. When the call ended, the room felt strangely lighter. Not because justice had arrived, because it was finally moving without my help. Late that evening, the laboratory door opened one final time. An elderly man entered wearing a worn brown overcoat despite the warm weather. Professor Samuel Whitmore. The man who had first convinced me archaeology wasn't about finding treasure. It was about protecting memory. He leaned on his cane. You look tired. I slept well. That isn't what I meant. He glanced toward the archive box. So, you found your voice. I stopped chasing theirs. He nodded slowly. Better. Naomi poured him tea. He accepted it gratefully. I watched the ceremony. I'm sorry you had to. He smiled. I'm not. You know what impressed me? What? You never stepped onto the stage. I didn't need to. Exactly. He tapped his cane lightly against the floor. Young scholars always believe victory means standing in front of everyone. And the strongest victories happen when the room changes after you've already walked away. The laboratory fell quiet. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Then Elena's phone rang. She answered immediately. Her expression hardened. What happened? She looked directly at me. The forensic team opened Dr. Vale's private archive, and they found something they weren't expecting. She closed the folder in front of her. A second artifact, one that had never been reported to any authority. A discovery hidden from the world. And judging from the expression on her face, it was about to change everything. The conference room at the International Provenance Registry was colder than any museum vault I had ever entered. Not because of the air conditioning, because every person seated around the polished oak table understood that history had just become evidence. Elena Foster placed a sealed evidence container in the center. No one touched it. The artifact recovered from Dr. Vale's private archive, she said, was not catalogued, reported, or declared. A silence settled over the room. Professor Whitmore adjusted his glasses. Naomi folded her arms. I simply watched. Elena continued. It remained hidden for 6 years. Why? Naomi asked. Elena looked toward me. I believe Mr. Mercer already knows. I shook my head. I have a suspicion. Tell us. The Liang excavation wasn't famous because of the star disk. Everyone looked at me. It became famous because the disk was found alone. Elena nodded. Go on. Ancient ceremonial objects almost never exist in isolation. I leaned forward. If there was one, I looked toward the evidence case. There should always have been another. The technicians carefully unlocked the container. Inside rested a bronze seal no larger than a man's palm. Its surface carried symbols nearly identical to those engraved on the Liang star disk. Only older. Much older. Naomi inhaled sharply. It's the companion seal. Professor Whitmore whispered. It completes the ceremonial record. I looked at the object for a long moment. Then I closed my eyes. I remembered the excavation. The collapsing chamber. The dust. The torchlight. The moment Adrian shouted, "Don't write this one down." Back then I thought he meant we should secure the chamber first. I hadn't argued. I simply photographed everything before moving it. Every angle. Every stone. Every object. Every hand reaching toward them. You remember something. Elena's voice brought me back. Yes. What? He found the seal before I did. Everyone became still. He thought I hadn't noticed. Professor Whitmore frowned. But your records never mention it. They weren't allowed to. Naomi looked confused. What do you mean? The board received only the edited field reports. She stared. There were original reports. And submission reports. Elena opened another folder. We've confirmed that. She slid several pages across the table. The originals. My originals. Every page contained observations that never appeared in the museum archives. The missing chamber. The companion seal. Adrian's handwritten instruction. Secondary object withheld pending private review. Naomi's face paled. He actually wrote that? He never imagined anyone would see it again. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian sat inside an interview room at the Ministry of Culture. The walls were plain. No paintings. No awards. No audience. Only 2 investigators and a recording device. State your name. Dr. Adrian Marcus Vale. Occupation. Archaeologist. Were. He looked up sharply. What? You've been suspended. His jaw tightened. I haven't been convicted. No. The investigator opened a file. But you've already been contradicted. He slid a photograph across the table. The hidden bronze seal. Adrian's pupils narrowed almost imperceptibly. I've never seen that. The investigator didn't respond. Instead, he placed another photograph beside it. A younger Adrian. Inside the excavation chamber. Holding the seal. Time-stamped. My camera. My photograph. His fingers stopped moving. For the first time, he looked afraid. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Elena had arranged for me to receive copies of every official transcript. Not because I requested them. Because she believed I deserved to know. Justice no longer depended on my presence. It moved on its own. I preferred it that way. That evening Ethan returned. This time carrying a hard drive. I almost forgot. He placed it carefully onto my desk. What is it? Drone footage. Naomi frowned. The museum banned aerial recording. They did. He smiled weakly. I never deleted mine. I connected the drive to my computer. The footage loaded slowly. The excavation site appeared from above. The ancient temple. Collapsed walls. Supply tents. Workers moving between trenches. Then, frame by frame, the camera drifted over the central chamber. Professor Whitmore leaned closer. Pause. I stopped the video. There, clear as daylight. Adrian leaving the chamber alone, holding something wrapped inside a canvas cloth. No inventory tag. No documentation. No witnesses. Only the drone. Ethan swallowed. I didn't even know what I'd filmed. Neither had I. Until now. The room remained silent long after the video ended. No one reached for the keyboard. No one replayed the footage. Sometimes evidence doesn't require discussion. Only acceptance. Naomi slowly leaned back in her chair. He carried it out himself. Yes. And nobody questioned him. He was the expedition director. Professor Whitmore sighed. Authority often looks identical to honesty. His words lingered. Not because they were profound. Because they explained far too much. By the following morning, the ministry had expanded its investigation, not only into Adrian, into the museum itself, financial records, grant applications, acquisition reports, insurance declarations. Departments that had ignored my letters suddenly found investigators requesting every archived email. The institution that had once hidden behind prestige now found prestige offering no protection. I spent the day restoring damaged pottery. A quiet task. Deliberate. Predictable. Each fragment belonged somewhere. Unlike people, Naomi watched me from across the conservation table. You really aren't curious? I am. Then why aren't you refreshing the news every 5 minutes? I smiled faintly. Because broken pottery teaches patience. She laughed despite herself. I'll never understand you. You don't need to. I think I do. She put down her brush. You waited 7 years. Yes. You never tried ruining him. No. You could have leaked documents. Yes. You could have gone public. Yes. So why didn't you? I turned another fragment beneath the magnifying lamp. Because I wanted the truth to survive even if I didn't. She frowned. I don't understand. If I made it about me. I carefully aligned 2 ancient pieces. People would choose sides. And now they're choosing evidence. That afternoon Elena arrived carrying another sealed envelope. I have good news. I've learned not to trust those words. She smiled. Fair. She handed me the envelope. Inside was a letter from the International Archaeological Council. I read it once. Then again. Naomi leaned over my shoulder. Her eyes widened. They're reopening the Liang excavation. Professor Whitmore slowly removed his glasses. After all these years, Elena nodded. The chamber was never fully documented, because Adrian closed it. Exactly. She folded her hands. The council wants the original field director to lead the reopening. Everyone looked at me. I looked at the letter. 7 years ago, I would have accepted before reaching the second paragraph. Now, I quietly folded it. I decline. Naomi stared. What? Elena blinked. You don't want your sight back? It isn't mine. It belongs to history. Professor Whitmore smiled. Very slightly. As expected, Naomi looked between us. I feel like I'm missing something. I answered softly. If I return now, they'll say I only wanted recognition. Elena slowly nodded. So what do you want? The excavation deserves someone the world hasn't already turned into a headline. Silence followed. Then Elena laughed quietly. I've interviewed hundreds of academics. And you're the first one who refused the greatest opportunity of his career. I already had the greatest opportunity. The day I uncovered the star disk, that evening another news alert appeared. Not about Adrian. About the museum's trustees. 3 had resigned. 2 more were under investigation for suppressing evidence. Donors suspended funding. International partnerships froze. The museum entrance, once crowded with tourists, now stood behind temporary security barriers. I watched the broadcast without satisfaction. Buildings could recover. Institutions could rebuild. Trust was harder. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. A hesitant female voice spoke. Mr. Mercer? Yes. My name is Claire Donovan. The name meant nothing. I worked as Dr. Vale's executive assistant. I remained silent. I've resigned. I'm sorry to hear that. No. Her voice trembled. I'm calling because I found something in his office before investigators sealed it. What? A handwritten letter. Addressed to whom? To you. The laboratory seemed to grow quieter. He never sent it. No. What does it say? I didn't read all of it. She hesitated. But the first line, her breathing caught. The first line says he never intended to steal the discovery. I closed my eyes. Not because I believed him, because sometimes the most dangerous truths begin with excuses. Claire Donovan arrived just after dawn. She looked nothing like the confident executive assistants who usually stood beside celebrated scholars. Her navy coat was wrinkled. Her eyes were red from a sleepless night. She carried a single brown envelope pressed tightly against her chest, as though letting go of it would somehow erase the last 7 years. I almost burned it. She sat across from me, placing the envelope carefully on the table. I thought it was another draft speech. You changed your mind. I saw your name. The room remained quiet. Naomi poured tea without saying a word. Professor Whitmore simply observed. Claire slid the envelope toward me. It was hidden inside his personal journal. The handwriting on the front stopped me before I even opened it. Adrian's. I had read those sharp, deliberate letters thousands of times across excavation reports. For a moment, memory almost felt heavier than anger. I unfolded the pages. The letter wasn't addressed to the media. It wasn't intended for a court. It wasn't even an apology. It was a confession written to someone Adrian never found the courage to face. Rowan, if you're reading this, then the version of me that believed he could keep winning has finally disappeared. I stopped reading. Not because I couldn't continue. Because I suddenly understood why he had never mailed it. This wasn't written for redemption. It was written because he had run out of lies to tell himself. I continued. The first theft wasn't your discovery. It was your confidence in me. Everything else became easier after that. Naomi lowered her eyes. Professor Whitmore remained motionless. Only the ticking wall clock disturbed the silence. The next paragraphs described something I had never known. Years before the Liang expedition, Adrian had been denied tenure. His publications were ordinary. Funding had disappeared. His career was quietly collapsing. Then the expedition was announced. He believed it was his last opportunity. When you uncovered the star disk, everyone looked at you. For the first time in years, no one looked at me. My grip tightened slightly. Not from rage. From disappointment. I had never wanted admiration. Only accuracy. At first I only intended to publish before you did. Then donors arrived. Then awards followed. Then every lie demanded another. Claire spoke softly. I never knew. I believe you. He wasn't cruel every day. I know. He convinced himself he was protecting the museum. No. I folded the letter. He was protecting the version of himself the museum rewarded. No one argued, because there was nothing left to argue. That afternoon, the ministry scheduled its public hearing. Unlike a criminal trial, the hearing would determine professional accountability. Every major museum in the country streamed it live. Scholars, students, journalists, curators, people who had once applauded Adrian now waited to hear him explain himself. I almost didn't attend. Professor Whitmore placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You should witness the ending. I've already accepted it. This isn't for you. He looked toward the courthouse. It's for history. The hearing chamber was filled long before proceedings began. Television cameras lined the walls. Rows of historians whispered among themselves. At the center sat Adrian. His tailored suit remained immaculate. His reputation did not. For the first time since I had met him, he looked tired, not defeated, just exhausted, as though maintaining the weight of 7 years had finally become impossible. The chairwoman adjusted her microphone. Dr. Adrian Vale. He stood. You've reviewed the evidence presented by the ministry? I have. Do you dispute the registry findings? A long pause. Then, no. The room shifted. Not loudly, just enough to remind everyone that admissions often sounded quieter than accusations. The chairwoman continued. Did Rowan Mercer serve as primary excavation director? Yes. Did you knowingly publish his work under your own authorship? Another pause. Longer. Painful. Yes. Camera shutters erupted. Nobody interrupted them. They had waited years for that single word. Yes. Evidence replaced speeches. The ministry displayed each document one by one. My original notebooks, the excavation duty roster, the drone footage, the hidden bronze seal, the registry authentication logs. No dramatic music, no emotional narration, just facts. Each one quietly dismantled the story Adrian had spent years constructing. The chairwoman looked toward him once more. Is there any evidence you wish to submit in your defense? Adrian slowly reached into his briefcase. The entire room leaned forward. He removed nothing. His hand remained empty. He quietly closed the case. No, not because he lacked documents. Because every document he once trusted had already collapsed beneath the originals. Then something unexpected happened. He turned toward me. The hearing room followed his gaze. For the first time in 7 years, there were no reporters between us. No museum board. No audience applauding one man while ignoring another. Only 2 archaeologists. One who had discovered history. Another who had tried to rewrite it. I'm sorry. His voice barely carried across the chamber. No performance. No tears. No attempt to negotiate. Just 2 words. They arrived 7 years too late. I looked at him for a long moment. I know. Nothing more. No speech. No lecture. No accusation. Because forgiveness and accountability were never the same thing. Whether I forgave him belonged to me. Whether he faced consequences belonged to everyone else. The hearing continued. By unanimous decision, the ministry announced its ruling. All academic honors awarded to Adrian Vale over the previous 7 years were revoked. His excavation license was permanently canceled. His publications related to the Liang excavation were withdrawn from international journals, pending correction. The museum was ordered to restore the original historical record. Every institution using his research would receive revised authorship notices. History itself would be amended, not rewritten, corrected. The announcement spread across the world within hours. Museums updated their digital archives. University libraries replaced citations. Documentaries revised their scripts. News headlines changed, not overnight, but steadily, one corrected sentence at a time. My inbox filled with invitations, keynote lectures, award ceremonies, honorary fellowships, exclusive interviews. I declined almost all of them. Naomi laughed when she saw the growing stack of unopened envelopes. You really are impossible. I've spent enough years chasing recognition. And now, I'd rather chase discoveries. 3 weeks later, the International Museum Consortium held another ceremony, far smaller than the first. No orchestra, no dramatic unveiling, only scholars, researchers, conservation teams, people who had actually worked behind the scenes. Director Malcolm Reeves stepped onto the stage. He looked older, humbler. The Liang star disk, he began, will remain one of humanity's greatest discoveries. He paused. But today, we recognize that discoveries belong to those who uncover them, not those who stand closest to the cameras. He invited me forward. I hesitated. Professor Whitmore smiled from the front row. Naomi gave me an encouraging nod. I walked onto the stage. No applause at first, just respectful silence. Then, one curator stood. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall was standing. Not celebrating me. Respecting the truth. There was a difference. Malcolm handed me a small wooden box. Inside rested the original field compass I had carried throughout the Liang expedition. Recovered from museum storage. Forgotten for years. I closed the lid gently. Some things were worth keeping. Not because they proved who I was. Because they reminded me why I had begun. Outside the museum, the evening sun reflected across the glass walls. Inside, the exhibition remained open. The Liang star disc still occupied the center of the hall. Only one small change had been made. The bronze plaque beneath the artifact now read, Primary Excavation Director, Rowan Mercer. It was a single line. No grand speech. No dramatic flourish. Just the truth. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Spring arrived quietly. The museum gardens bloomed long before I noticed. For years, I had measured time by excavation seasons, grant deadlines, and publication schedules. Now I measured it by something much simpler. Silence. Not the heavy silence that follows betrayal. The peaceful kind that no longer asks for answers. The conservation laboratory had become my entire world again. Broken porcelain, weathered bronze, ancient silk fragments. Objects that asked only one thing of the person restoring them. Patience. Naomi walked into the laboratory carrying a thick envelope. You've received another invitation. I suspected I would. She placed it beside my microscope. You aren't even curious? I'll read it. When I'm finished with this bowl. She laughed. You're impossible. I aligned another ceramic fragment beneath the magnifying lens. If I rush this piece, it won't fit. You mean the bowl? I mean life. She shook her head. You've become philosophical. I've become tired. There's a difference. Not always. An hour later, I finally opened the envelope. It wasn't from another university or another museum. It came from the International Council for Cultural Recovery. They weren't offering an award. They were requesting help. A series of historical sites damaged by illegal excavation needed someone to organize restoration efforts. No media campaign. No publicity. Just work. Real work. Naomi leaned over my shoulder. This sounds exactly like you. It does. So, I smiled. I think I've finally found my next excavation. Professor Whitmore visited that afternoon. His health had declined noticeably. His steps were slower. His hands trembled slightly when lifting his teacup. Age was winning. He didn't seem interested in fighting it. I heard you're leaving. Only for a while. Good. I looked at him. You aren't going to tell me to stay? He chuckled softly. I spent 40 years telling talented people where they belonged. And I was wrong most of the time. He looked around the laboratory. You don't belong to a building. No. You belong wherever history needs protecting. Before sunset, we walked through the museum together. Not as employee and mentor. Simply as two archaeologists. Visitors gathered around restored exhibits. Children pressed their hands against display glass, fascinated by civilizations older than imagination. Whitmore stopped in front of the Liang star disc. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally, he asked, Do you still feel angry? I considered the question carefully. I remember the anger. But I no longer carry it. He nodded with quiet satisfaction. That's harder than revenge. I know. A young boy tugged on his mother's sleeve nearby. Mom, who found this? His mother read the plaque aloud. Rowan Mercer. The boy stared at the artifact. Can people still discover things? His mother smiled. Every day. They walked away before noticing I had overheard them. Whitmore glanced sideways at me. You hear that? Yes. That's the only recognition worth keeping. The following week, I traveled north. Not to Liang. To another forgotten valley where illegal excavators had abandoned an ancient monastery after stripping away anything they could sell. The place felt wounded. Stone walls collapsed into weeds. Centuries-old murals faded beneath rain damage. Broken statues lay scattered across the ground. A local conservation officer greeted me. We've been waiting. For me. For someone who still believes ruins deserve patience. I looked across the valley. This place had no headlines. No television crews. No famous discoveries. Only quiet work waiting to be done. Exactly what I needed. Weeks became months. The monastery slowly changed. Not dramatically. History never healed dramatically. Every repaired wall, every stabilized painting, every cataloged fragment represented dozens of invisible decisions. One afternoon, volunteers gathered beneath a temporary shelter while heavy rain poured across the mountains. Among them was a university student named Daniel. He studied me for several minutes before finally speaking. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." The volunteers laughed. He smiled awkwardly. "Why archaeology? There are easier careers." "There are. And better paying ones." "Definitely. So why?" I looked toward the ruined monastery. When people destroy history, they're usually trying to control the future. Daniel frowned. "I don't understand. If people forget what really happened, they'll believe whatever they're told." His expression slowly changed. "So archaeology isn't about old objects." "No, it's about memory." Months later, the restoration project officially reopened the monastery to the public. There were no celebrities, only local families, teachers, students, monks who had returned after decades away. An elderly monk approached me carrying a small wooden carving. "You restored our home. We only repaired the walls." He smiled. "You also repaired something people cannot measure." Before I could answer, he placed the carving in my hands. A simple compass rose. Handmade. Not valuable. Not ancient. Just meaningful. "I have nothing else to give." I bowed slightly. "This is enough." That evening Naomi called. "I have news. Good or bad. Depends how much you enjoy surprises." "I'm listening." The International Archaeological Council voted unanimously. "For what?" "They've established a new research ethics award." I smiled. "That's encouraging. They named it after you." I nearly laughed. "They shouldn't have. They already did." Silence settled between us. "I won't attend the ceremony." "I know. You already declined, didn't you?" "I did." She laughed. "I answered for you. You know me too well." Later that night, I walked alone through the monastery courtyard. The mountains were quiet. Stars filled the sky. For years I had believed justice meant reclaiming what had been taken. Now I understood something different. Justice had restored my name. Peace had restored my life. They weren't the same gift. And peace was far more difficult to earn. A message appeared on my phone. From Elena Foster. Investigation officially closed. All historical records permanently corrected. Thank you for protecting the evidence long before anyone believed it. I looked toward the mountains. The wind carried the scent of pine through the ancient stone corridors. Some stories ended in applause. Mine ended with something much rarer. The certainty that the truth no longer needed me to defend it. It could stand on its own. Autumn painted the mountains in deep shades of amber before I returned to the city. The skyline looked smaller than I remembered. Or perhaps I had simply stopped measuring my life against it. My train arrived just after sunrise. There were no reporters waiting. No photographers. No welcoming committee. Exactly as I preferred. As I stepped onto the platform, my phone vibrated. A short message from Elena. "The museum asked whether you'd consider one final meeting." I read it twice, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. There had been a time when every message from that institution made my chest tighten. Now, it felt like receiving a letter from a house I no longer lived in. The boardroom hadn't changed. The same polished walnut table. The same portraits of former directors. The same tall windows overlooking the museum gardens. Only the people were different. Director Malcolm Reeves stood as I entered. So did everyone else. Not out of obligation. Out of respect. Malcolm gestured toward the empty chair at the head of the table. "It's yours." "No." I chose a seat halfway down instead. A few people exchanged glances. Professor Whitmore, seated quietly near the window, smiled to himself. Malcolm cleared his throat. "We've spent months rebuilding the institution." "I've heard. We've revised our ethics policies." "Good. We've established independent verification procedures." "Better. And we'd like you to become director of research." The room fell completely still. Naomi looked at me, saying nothing. She already knew my answer. Malcolm continued. "You would have complete authority. Full academic independence. Your own team. The opportunity to shape the future." 7 years earlier, I might have accepted before he finished speaking. Now, I looked around the room. At the polished wood. The expensive artwork. The carefully rehearsed sincerity. Then I looked through the window. A group of schoolchildren stood in the museum courtyard, laughing as they followed their teacher toward the entrance. History belonged to them, not to this table. I appreciate the offer. Malcolm nodded hopefully. But I declined. No surprise crossed Naomi's face. Only quiet amusement. One trustee frowned. May we ask why? You already know. I'd still like to hear it. I folded my hands. I spent years believing this building was where I could do the most good. And now, I've learned history exists far beyond museum walls. Silence answered me. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Professor Whitmore slowly rose from his chair. His cane tapped softly against the wooden floor. I'd like to say something. Everyone turned toward him. I've taught archaeology for 48 years. He smiled faintly. I've watched brilliant students become famous. I've watched famous scholars become forgotten. He looked directly at the board. But today, the most accomplished archaeologist in this room is the only one refusing power. His eyes found mine. And that's precisely why he deserves it. No one applauded. They didn't need to. Some truths required no ceremony. As the meeting ended, Malcolm stopped me near the doorway. I never asked you something. What? Why didn't you expose Adrian years earlier? I looked toward the museum corridor where visitors wandered quietly between exhibitions. Because if I had, people would have argued about me. And now, they argue about evidence. He nodded slowly. I think I finally understand. I hope so. For the museum's sake. Winter arrived with the first snowfall. The monastery restoration had expanded into a nationwide preservation initiative. Volunteers traveled from universities across the country. Retired craftsmen returned to teach forgotten restoration techniques. Students who had once dreamed only of spectacular discoveries now learned how to preserve the ordinary pieces history often overlooked. That change mattered more than any award. One afternoon, Daniel approached me carrying a weathered clay tablet. We almost missed this. I examined it carefully. A simple inventory record. Nothing spectacular. No hidden treasure. No royal decree. Just the daily record of grain delivered to a monastery centuries ago. Daniel looked disappointed. It's not important, is it? I smiled. It survived. So history isn't only written by kings. He studied the tablet again. Then his expression changed. He finally understood. Several months later, Professor Whitmore passed away peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was small. Just family, former students, a handful of archaeologists. No television cameras. No official speeches. Exactly as he would have wanted. After the ceremony, the lawyer handling his estate handed me a worn leather notebook. He wanted you to have this. I opened it that evening. Most pages contained ordinary field observations. Plant species, soil conditions, travel notes. Near the end, I found a folded page addressed simply to Rowan. I unfolded it. If you're reading this, I've already gone somewhere no map can follow. Despite myself, I smiled. It sounded exactly like him. Never mistake recognition for purpose. Recognition belongs to other people. Purpose belongs only to you. Protect the second. Accept the first only when it arrives quietly. The page ended with a single sentence. History remembers those who preserve it more faithfully than those who possess it. I closed the notebook and looked toward the mountains outside my window. The snow continued falling. Soft. Unhurried. Certain. Years later, visitors entered museums around the world and stopped before the Liang Star disc. Most read the plaque. Some didn't. Children asked questions. Researchers took notes. Students debated excavation methods. Life moved forward. One afternoon, I stood quietly at the back of the gallery while a young guide explained the exhibit to a class of teenagers. She never noticed me. The discovery became famous, she said, not only because of the artifact, but because it changed how museums verify archaeological evidence. A student raised his hand. What happened to the man who stole it? The guide thought for a moment. He lost everything that depended on a lie. Another student asked, and what happened to the man who found it? She smiled. He kept searching. That was all. No dramatic ending. No legend. No heroic exaggeration. Just the truth. I slipped my hands into my coat pockets and quietly walked toward the exit. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the museum steps. People continued entering. Others continued leaving. History belonged to all of them. As for me, I no longer needed my name carved into stone. It had already found its rightful place. Not beneath an artifact, but within the quiet certainty that truth, when preserved with patience, can outlive even the most carefully constructed lie.